Before he could process it further, the manager herself reappeared. Her steps were quick and annoyed, as if she had spent the last few minutes trying to regain control of the situation in her head. But the moment she saw the two visitors, especially the older man, the annoyance drained from her face. "Good afternoon," she said, automatically adjusting her jacket. Her voice softened in the way it usually did when she sensed money. "Welcome to our store. If you need anything at all, please let me know." The older man didn't respond to her warm tone. Instead, he kept his gaze on the customer. The manager noticed. Her smile flickered for a second, then snapped back into place. "Were you all here together?" she asked, glancing back and forth. The woman responded politely, "Yes, we're meeting him." The manager's eyebrows lifted. She stared at the customer, as if seeing him for the first time. But she quickly recovered, brushing invisible dust off her sleeves. "Well," she said, "if you're looking for something more appropriate for your meeting, I can show you our premium items. They're priced fairly." The older man finished for her. She nodded, relieved to be understood, but the man chuckled gently. The kind of laugh someone makes when they see a situation unraveling in slow motion. He turned to the customer again. "Is this the woman you mentioned?" The manager froze. "Mentioned?" she repeated. The customer finally lifted his eyes. They were calm but firm. "Yes," he said. "She's the one who wouldn't let me see the items I asked for. And the one who told me I didn't belong here?" For a split second, the manager didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then she laughed lightly, the kind of laugh people use when they hope they misunderstood. "Oh, we must have had a miscommunication," she said. "I was only trying to ensure our merchandise is protected. We have strict rules about who handles certain items." The older man didn't smile. "Strict rules," he repeated, "or strict assumptions?" The manager stiffened. "I don't make assumptions," she said too quickly. The older man turned slightly, offering a polite but unwavering expression. "Well, that's interesting. Because this gentleman," he gestured toward the customer, "happens to be one of the primary investors reviewing whether your store will be approved for expansion next quarter." Pure and complete. The team member at the shirts pressed a hand over his mouth. The cashier's eyes widened. Even the couple near the handbags stopped, pretending not to stare. The manager blinked as though trying to process the words. "I don't understand," she whispered. The woman opened the folder and slid it across the counter toward the customer. "These are the documents he needs to confirm your location's performance, staff conduct, and customer treatment standards. His signature determines whether your branch qualifies for the new investment." The folder sat on the counter like a dropped weight. The manager's face lost all color. She looked at the customer. Really looked at him like she was only now seeing the truth. The calm way he carried himself. The quiet confidence in his eyes. The unshaken patience he'd shown. Her breath hitched. "Sir, I didn't know," she whispered. "If I had known, you would have treated me differently," he asked softly. There was no anger in his tone. No raised voice. Just a question that sat heavier than any shouting ever could. The manager opened her mouth, but no words formed. Her throat tightened. Around them, the whole store had fallen into a stunned hush. The customer gently touched the folder, but didn't open it. "Treatment shouldn't depend on who someone is," he said quietly, "or what someone owns. It should depend on basic respect." The manager swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. Her hands trembled at her sides. "I apologize," she managed. "I truly do. I didn't mean to offend," he cut her off gently. "But you did. And you made it clear I wasn't welcome." For a moment, the manager stood frozen, pain creeping into her expression as the weight of her actions finally settled. The older man placed a hand on the counter. "Should we begin the review?" he asked. The customer hesitated. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said calmly, "but not here." He turned slightly toward the team member who had helped him earlier. "Could you show us to the meeting room?" he asked. The young worker nodded quickly. "Of course. Please follow me." As the group began moving, the manager reached out. "Sir, please," she said. "Let me assist. Let me fix this." Now the customer paused only long enough to offer her a small, almost sad smile. You could have helped earlier, he said. When it mattered, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He didn't embarrass her, but the simplicity of his words struck harder than anything else could. The manager lowered her hand, stunned, watching as they walked toward the back hallway. The folder in the woman's arms, the older man's calm steps, the quiet authority of the customer, they all felt like pieces of a truth she had tried to ignore. The cashier stared at her with wide eyes. The team member guiding them looked back once, a mixture of sympathy and disbelief on his face. By the time the group disappeared behind the hallway door, the manager finally sat down on a nearby chair. Her legs had gone weak. She pressed her face into her hands because she knew something. Something she had never expected to face that day. Karma didn't wait for closing. Time had already arrived. The meeting room in the one back of the store was small, but neat. With a long table, glass walls, and quiet lighting, normally it was used only for staff discussions or small presentations. But today, it felt like a stage. Everything that had happened out on the sales floor now hung in the air like a heavy curtain. The team member who had stepped up earlier guided the three visitors inside. He looked nervous but also strangely proud, because he had been the only one to show the customer basic respect when no one else did. He gestured toward the chairs. "Please make yourselves comfortable," he said. His voice was soft but steady. The customer gave him a small nod. "Thank you," he said, and the young man felt a quiet wave of relief. Once everyone took their seats, the older man opened his briefcase and placed a few documents on the table. The woman with him did the same. They moved with calm confidence, the kind that tries to fix wrongs rather than punish people. The customer took a seat last. He didn't rush. He didn't seem angry. But beneath his calm expression, there was a weight that wasn't there when he first entered the store. Something inside him had shifted. The older man looked at him. "Are you all right?" he asked. The customer nodded slowly. "I'm fine," he said. "Just thinking about how quickly people decide who deserves kindness." He tapped the table lightly with his fingers. "It never stops surprising me." The woman sitting beside them gave a small nod of agreement. "People show their true selves when they believe no one important is watching," she said. The customer let out a breath, almost a tired sigh. "Exactly." The older man adjusted his glasses and opened the folder the woman had carried in earlier. "Before we begin the review," he said gently, "I want you to know something. What happened out there? None of that will be ignored. But also, none of what happened reflects on you. Your presence here is based on respect, not assumption." The customer appreciated that. He didn't need anyone to defend him, but their words mattered. The woman flipped through her pages. "We've completed the financial assessments," she said, "and your notes were invaluable. All that remains is your final recommendation." She pushed a form toward him. Through the glass walls, the customer could see the store still buzzing gently. The manager was pacing, her hands folded together, her face full of worry. Some shoppers whispered to one another, trying to understand what was happening. And the team member who had helped earlier stood near the shirts section. Pretending to fold clothes while stealing glances toward the room, the customer looked at the paper in front of him. It was simple, just a recommendation form. But today, it carried more weight than usual. "Let's talk," he said. The older man leaned back, listening. The customer folded his hands. "I don't want anyone losing their job because of me," he said plainly. "Even the manager." The woman raised an eyebrow in surprise. "After how she treated you," he nodded. "If people were punished every time they acted out of ignorance, the world would be empty." The older man smiled softly. "You're a kinder man than most." The customer shook his head. "Not kind," he said quietly. "Just aware. I've seen too much to believe that anger solves anything." He paused, looking at the glass. "But I can't pretend what she did wasn't wrong. And I can't ignore that the store's environment allowed it." The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, the woman asked, "What do you want done?" The customer looked up. His voice was steady and clear. "I want training in this store to change. Not a lecture, not a punishment. Actual training. On treating every customer with respect. on not assuming who someone is just by looking at them, on listening before judging. The older man nodded thoughtfully. I can arrange that, customer added, and I want the team involved, especially the young man who helped me earlier. He deserves recognition. Grateful smile crossed the woman's face. We can do that too, he nodded. Good. It was supposed to be a quick stop, nothing more than a simple visit to a high-end boutique on a busy afternoon. The sun was warm, the streets were lively, and the store's tall glass windows shimmered like they were inviting everyone inside. When the customer stepped through the doors, he wasn't thinking about anything dramatic happening. He only wanted to pick out a nice gift for his sister to celebrate her promotion at work. He had saved for it and planned the moment for weeks. It was meant to be a happy day. Inside, the store was calm and quiet. Soft music played in the background, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Every shelf looked perfectly arranged, every display spotless. The customer took a slow walk across the shiny floor, looking at different bags and accessories, trying to find something that felt right. He didn't rush. He wasn't bothering anyone, simply wanted to look around like everyone else. But while he was minding his own business, the store employees noticed him, and their expressions changed almost instantly. They were standing near the counter, pretending to fix a display, but their eyes kept sliding toward him, following him in a way that felt uncomfortable. He tried to ignore it at first, thought maybe he was overthinking it. After all, people look around in stores all the time. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but after a few minutes, it became obvious that it wasn't. Whenever he moved to a different section, they moved too. Whenever he paused to look at something, they whispered to each other. He could hear small bits of their comments, just enough to understand the tone, doubtful, dismissive, and judgmental. Still, he kept his focus on the reason he was there. His sister had worked so hard to reach her promotion, and he wanted to buy her something she would always remember. There was a limited edition handbag displayed inside a glass case, something he thought she might really like. It had a soft, elegant design and looked perfect for the occasion. So he gathered his courage, walked up to the nearest employee, and asked politely, "Excuse me, could I take a look at that handbag?" The employee paused, looked him up and down, and let out a small breath through her nose. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a message. She didn't hide the annoyance in her eyes. Instead of answering, she glanced toward the manager, who was standing a few feet away. The manager didn't come over with a welcoming smile like one would expect in a high-end store. He walked slowly, as if he had been called to solve a problem rather than serve a customer. When he reached the glass case, he didn't open it. He didn't even look at the handbag. He looked directly at the customer. "This item is only for serious buyers," the manager said. His voice was calm, but his tone was firm and cold. A few people in the store turned their heads, curious about the sudden tension. The customer stood there quietly, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being talked to like that. He wasn't causing trouble, wasn't making demands. He had asked a simple question, so he tried again, gently. "I am interested in buying it. I just wanted to see it up close." The manager didn't budge. "Most people who want this piece already know its price," he replied as if testing him. "It's not cheap." It was no kindness, no customer service tone. Just an assumption that he wasn't someone who could afford it. The customer felt a tightness in his chest. He wasn't angry yet, mostly confused, a little embarrassed. He noticed two shoppers nearby staring at him with awkward sympathy. It felt like the room had shifted, like he didn't belong there. He slowly placed his hands in his pockets, partly to comfort himself, and partly to avoid giving anyone another reason to watch him. He wasn't trying to argue. He didn't want a scene. He simply stepped back a little and said softly, "It's okay." But the moment didn't end there. As he moved toward another part of the store, another employee whispered loudly enough for him to hear, "Some people just come in here to take pictures for their social media." Her coworker laughed, not even trying to hide it. The customer swallowed hard, pretending he didn't hear anything. He didn't want to show how much it bothered him, but inside, the sting was real. He felt small for a moment, even though he knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He had been treated like he didn't belong in a place that welcomed everyone else. He walked toward the shelves again, trying to shake off the feeling. He picked up a wallet, just to look at something simple. hoping it would distract him. He read the label, touched the stitching, but the mood had already changed. It was hard to think about gifts when the air around him felt heavy with judgment. After a few minutes, he tried one more time. This time he approached a different employee, a young man who seemed a bit more neutral. Maybe this one would treat him normally. "Hi," the customer said in a calm tone. "Could you tell me a little about this line of bags? I'm shopping for a gift." But before the young man could answer, the manager appeared again. He didn't even look at the customer this time. He addressed the employee directly. "Make sure he's not getting in the way," the manager said in a low voice, but not low enough. "We've had issues with people wandering around aimlessly." That was the breaking point. The young employee looked uncomfortable. The customer stepped back slowly, his heart sinking. He realized he was not welcome, no matter how polite he was, no matter what he said. The staff had already made up their minds about him. He turned away from them and began walking toward the exit. His steps were steady, but inside he felt a mix of confusion, hurt, and disappointment. He had never imagined something so small. Shopping for a gift could turn into something so humiliating as he neared the door. He looked back for a moment. The employees had returned to their stations, whispering again. The manager stood with his arms crossed, as if proud of the way he had handled the situation. The customer let out a slow breath. He didn't want anger to take over. He didn't want to hold on to bitterness. But he couldn't ignore the feeling of being judged so unfairly. He pushed open the door, ready to step outside and leave the store behind. In his mind, he had already decided not to return. He would find a gift somewhere else, a place where he didn't feel like he was being watched like a suspect. But just as he reached the entrance, something unexpected happened. A group of people in formal clothing walked into the store. They didn't look like regular shoppers. They had an air of authority, moving with purpose, as if they were there for an important reason. One of them glanced at the customer briefly, offering a polite nod before continuing inside. The customer didn't think much of it, simply stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air. He thought the worst part of his day was behind him. But little did he know, the humiliation he faced inside the store had already set off a chain of events, one that would unfold before closing time. In a way no one inside the store was prepared for, the customer stood outside the store for a moment, letting the cool air calm his thoughts. He tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling, the embarrassment that clung to him after the way he was treated inside. He told himself it wasn't worth holding on to, had better things to focus on. A gift for his sister, for example. Something that would make her smile. That was the important part. But even as he walked toward the nearby corner, something inside him felt unsettled. It wasn't anger, it was more like a quiet sadness, the kind that stays even when you try not to think about it. He wasn't a stranger to unfair moments, but every time it happened, it carried its own weight. He stopped near a bench, taking out his phone and checking the time. He still had a few hours before he had to be somewhere else. Maybe he could look for another store. Maybe somewhere friendlier, somewhere that didn't make him feel unwelcome the second he walked in. But before he could take another step, he heard noise behind him, the sound of shoes against tile, voices talking quickly, something urgent in their tone. He turned slightly and saw a group of people in formal clothing walking deeper into the luxury store. They weren't customers. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the layout, the displays, the staff. He didn't think anything of it. Maybe it was some kind of meeting. Maybe they were there to discuss business. Whatever it was, it didn't involve him. So he slowly continued down the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, trying to distract himself. Inside the store, however, things had already begun to shift. The manager, who had previously spoken to him so dismissively, rushed forward to greet the well-dressed visitors. His voice suddenly gained a bright, professional tone, the kind of voice he never once used with the customer who had just walked out. "Welcome," the manager said with an overly warm smile. "If you need anything at all, please let me know. We're happy to assist." One person from the group looked around slowly, taking in the store's atmosphere, and the staff's posture changed immediately. Everyone stood straighter, moved with more energy, and tried to look alert and helpful. The customer outside didn't know any of this was happening. He just kept walking, trying to find a way to shake off the sour feeling. But the day wasn't done with him yet. He stopped again near a bus stop, thinking maybe he should just sit down for a few minutes. His thoughts wandered to his sister, the way she'd worked hard to earn her promotion. How proud he was of her. He wanted to give her a gift that made her feel recognized, appreciated. Something meaningful. Even though he felt uncomfortable, he reminded himself that one store didn't define his worth. He wasn't going to let anyone ruin the day. He took a deep breath and looked up at the sky, letting his mind relax. But at the same moment, inside the store, the situation was heating up. One of the visitors, a woman with a calm but sharp, gazed at the manager.
How old is you?
How long have you been working here? Her tone wasn't hostile, just direct. The manager straightened proudly. For years. I make sure everything here runs smoothly. Our customer service is one of the best in the district. Another member of the group took out a tablet. We're here for an unannounced service inspection. The manager froze for a moment. His smile wavered. An inspection, he repeated. Today? Yes, the woman said. We're from the company's global auditing team. We review customer experiences, employee behavior, and store operations. The staff stiffened. Their eyes darted to each other. Realizing this wasn't a routine visit, one of the auditors continued looking around and finally asked, "Can you walk us through how you greet and assist customers?" The manager puffed his chest a little. Of course, we treat every customer equally and with the same respect and attention. Anyone who enters is welcomed warmly, no matter what. The woman folded her arms slowly, clearly not convinced. Good. Then let's take a look at your most recent interactions. Her tone was calm. But the message was clear. This was not going to be a friendly walkthrough. The employees looked around nervously. A couple of them shifted in place, avoiding eye contact with the auditors. They knew exactly what had just happened. And they suddenly wished they could erase the last 30 minutes. Meanwhile, outside, the customer took a slow walk to the end of the block. He wasn't angry at the store, but the experience stayed with him like a small cloud overhead. Some part of him felt frustrated at the way people jumped to conclusions about him. He wondered why it was always so easy for some people to judge someone they didn't even know. But even with those thoughts, he tried to stay positive. He reminded himself that the world still had good people. Most people, he believed, didn't see others through narrow assumptions. He tried to hold on to that, back inside the store. The auditing team continued their evaluation. Could we review the store camera footage for the last hour? One auditor asked. The manager nodded, though his face began to pale. Of course. Follow me. He led them to a small office in the back. The employees exchanged uneasy glances. They knew exactly what the footage would show. The whispers. The mocking. The manager's dismissive comments. One of the staff members quietly said to another, "This is not going to end well." The other nodded, biting their lip, while the auditors headed to the back office. One of them stayed out front, observing customer interactions. The energy in the store shifted completely. Every employee suddenly became overly polite, almost desperate for approval. Customers walking in were instantly greeted with smiles, offers of help, and warm tones. Some customers seemed confused by the sudden change, but none questioned it. Outside, customer finally decided to return to the parking area nearby. He wasn't in a rush, but he felt the day slipping away from him. He thought about his plan again. Find another store, find a nice gift, go home peacefully. But deep down, something tugged at him. Not anger, but a quiet question: why did he have to leave feeling unwelcome while others inside were treated so differently? Why him? What made the difference in their eyes? He shook his head gently. He didn't want to dwell on it. He knew letting it sit in his mind wouldn't help. Back inside. The auditors reviewed the footage. The manager stood stiffly beside them as they watched. At first, the footage showed regular activity. Customers walking in. Employees helping them. Nothing unusual then. The scene appeared the moment the customer walked in. The footage showed how the employees noticed him immediately. How their expressions changed. It showed them following him too closely, whispering to each other. It showed the manager approaching him with a cold tone, refusing to show him the handbag. It showed the mocking smirks, the dismissive behavior. The moment he walked toward the exit, when the footage ended. The room was silent. One of the auditors turned to the manager with a calm but firm expression. "Is this your standard for treating every customer equally?" The manager tried to form words. I was only trying to protect the merchandise. We've had incidents before." The woman raised a hand slightly. "We are not interested in excuses. We are evaluating actions." She looked at the footage again briefly before adding, "This is a clear violation of our company's policy." The manager swallowed nervously. He could feel sweat forming on his forehead. The auditors didn't yell. They didn't raise their voices, but their tone alone made it clear that consequences were coming. Meanwhile, outside, the customer stood near a small cafe window, thinking he might stop inside for a drink. But before he could go in, he noticed movement inside the luxury store again, the auditors walking across the floor with purpose. He didn't know what was happening. He couldn't hear anything from where he stood, but something told him that the situation inside was far more serious than anything he had imagined as he turned to continue walking. One of the auditors stepped outside, looking around the sidewalk as if searching for someone. Their eyes landed on him. "Excuse me?" the auditor said politely. Walking toward him, he blinked, surprised. He wasn't expecting anyone to speak to him. "Yes?" he asked quietly. The auditor softened their tone. "Were you in the store a short while ago?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. Why?" The auditor gave a gentle but serious expression. "We'd like to speak with you, if you don't mind." Just for a moment, he looked confused but didn't feel threatened. There was no hostility in the auditor's voice. So he nodded again. They guided him slowly back toward the store. "Entrance, not inside yet. Just close enough to talk. We're with the company's global auditing team," the auditor explained calmly. "We are reviewing customer service practices here today. We'd like to hear about your experience earlier." Customer didn't know what to say at first. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want anyone to get fired or embarrassed. He had simply wanted to buy a gift. But the auditor's expression was patient, encouraging. So he spoke carefully, honestly, without exaggeration. He told them about the whispers, the stares, the tone, the way the manager refused to let him see the handbag, the mocking comments. He didn't add anything dramatic. He kept his voice calm and soft. When he finished, the auditor nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest. We appreciate it." They paused before adding, "And I'm sorry you experienced that. No customer should." The customer looked down for a moment, unsure how to respond. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I just wanted to buy a gift. That's all." The auditor gave a small nod and turned back toward the store. Little did the customer know that his simple, honest words were about to change everything inside. Long before the store closed for the day, the customer followed the auditor only as far as the front entrance. He didn't step inside, not yet. He didn't feel comfortable crossing that line again after what had happened earlier. But the auditor didn't push him. They simply wanted clarification. And now that they had it, they gave him a gentle thank you before rejoining the rest of the team. He watched as the auditor walked away, disappearing into the store's bright interior. For a moment he wondered if he should leave. After everything, he had no reason to stay nearby. Still, something kept him close. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the feeling that the situation inside was bigger than he realized. He moved a few steps back toward the sidewalk, standing near one of the store windows. The glass was reflective enough that he couldn't see inside clearly, but he could make out bits of movement. The auditors talking, the manager walking nervously, a few customers looking confused. He didn't know what they were discussing. He didn't want anyone in trouble. All he had wanted was to look at a bag for his sister. He had never expected his quiet shopping trip to turn into something like this. Across the window, he saw the manager pacing near the registers. The manager appeared tense, every gesture sharp and uneasy. He could tell something was happening, something the staff hadn't expected. Inside, the atmosphere was shifting. The auditors, now aware of the earlier incident, moved with a focused purpose. They gathered near the counter where the manager stood. "Let's continue," one auditor said calmly, holding the tablet with the footage. "We still need to speak with your staff," The manager swallowed hard. Of course, anything you need. The employees nearby stiffened, exchanging nervous glances. Each of them remembered the comments they had whispered, the looks they had exchanged, the way they had behaved. They had assumed no one important was watching. Now it felt like the entire world was. The auditors began calling staff members one by one. They weren't harsh, but they were clear, direct. They asked simple questions. How do you treat customers who come in alone? How do you decide when to greet someone? Why'd you follow him around? The employees stumbled through their answers. Some tried to justify their behavior. Others said they didn't remember. But the auditors brought up the footage each time, calmly reminding them that everything had been recorded. While this happened inside, the customer waited outside quietly. He stood under the shade of the store's large sign, watching the street, the people walking by. The shop workers from nearby places going about their day. He didn't feel angry, just thoughtful. Life had taught him long ago that unfair moments happen to everyone. But he never liked seeing them happen, especially when they were so unnecessary. He wondered if he had done something wrong, if he had said something that made the employees uncomfortable. But no matter how he replayed it, he couldn't think of anything. He had walked in politely. He had asked politely. He had stood quietly. He just didn't look like the kind of customer the staff expected in a high-end store. And that alone had changed everything. A small sigh escaped him. He wished it didn't have to be like that. Back inside the store, the auditors' voices continued in the background. The manager tried to control the situation, but it was slipping further away from him with every question asked. One of the employees, the one who had whispered the rude comment earlier, stood shifting from foot to foot, unable to hide their nervousness. When it was their turn to speak, their voice cracked slightly. "We didn't mean anything by it," they said. "We were just talking." The auditor raised an eyebrow slightly. "Talking about a customer you hadn't spoken to yet?" The employee looked at the floor. "We were just being careful." Another auditor leaned forward slightly. "Being careful means assisting someone, greeting someone, treating them with the same respect as any other customer. What we saw was not careful. It was dismissive." The employee didn't reply. The auditors continued their review, taking notes. Their expressions never changed much, but their tone made it clear they were not pleased. Out on the sidewalk, the customer took a step away from the store, thinking maybe it was time to leave. But seconds later, someone called to him from behind. "Sir." He turned around and saw another person from the auditing team walking toward him. This one looked calmer than the others, with a more relaxed expression. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," the auditor said. "May I ask you one more thing?" "It won't take long." The customer nodded slowly. "Sure." The auditor gestured toward a bench near the store. "Could we talk there?" They both sat down, and the auditor spoke gently, choosing their words before saying them. "We reviewed the footage. We saw what happened. I want to thank you again for being honest about your experience." The customer gave a small nod. "I wasn't trying to complain. I just answered your questions." "I understand," the auditor said. "But please know your experience matters. It helps us understand where the store needs serious correction." The customer looked down at his hands. "I just wish they hadn't treated me like that." The auditor leaned forward slightly. "No one should be treated differently based on assumptions, and what happened earlier was unacceptable. Our job is to make sure it doesn't continue." The customer took a slow breath. The auditor's voice wasn't harsh or pitying. It was sincere. That alone eased some of the heaviness he had been feeling. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You don't have to thank me," the auditor replied with a faint smile. "We're just doing our part." Inside the store, however, the situation was escalating further. The auditors had finished speaking with the employees and were now gathered again near the counter, discussing next steps. The manager stood off to the side. Looking smaller than he had earlier, his confidence dimmed, his voice much quieter. Finally, one of the auditors asked the manager to join the group. "We've completed our initial review," the lead auditor said. "Yes," the manager replied nervously. And the auditor looked him straight in the eye. "We are preparing a report for corporate headquarters. It will include everything from today, the footage, staff interviews, and the customer statement." The manager's face tightened. Will there be consequences? That is not for us to decide, the auditor said. But the report will be thorough. The manager's shoulders slumped slightly. He knew what that meant. The customer outside could sense the tension even without hearing it. He saw through the window that the employees were moving stiffly, avoiding each other's eyes. Something inside the store had changed. The confidence, the casual behavior, the lack of accountability. All of it had been stripped away after a few minutes. The auditor beside him stood up. Before I go, they said, may I ask something personal? The customer nodded. Why didn't you say anything earlier? When the manager spoke to you the way he did. He hesitated, thinking carefully. I didn't want to make a scene, he said quietly. I didn't want people staring at me. I didn't want to fight with anyone. The auditor listened. I just wanted to shop, he added. That's all. The auditor nodded slowly. And you should have been able to do that without being judged. The customer looked away for a moment. He had felt that truth deeply, not with anger, but with a quiet heaviness. The auditor stood and offered a small, respectful nod. Thank you again. We have what we need. We appreciate your time. The customer stood as well. I hope things improve, he said softly. We intend to make sure they do, the auditor replied. With that, the auditor went back inside, leaving the customer standing alone on the sidewalk again. He stayed there for a few seconds, deciding what to do. He could walk away, leave the day behind him. But curiosity tugged at him again, telling him to wait a little longer. Something inside him felt that this wasn't over yet. Inside the store, the auditors regrouped. They asked the staff to gather in the back room for a final discussion. The employees slowly walked toward the back, their eyes down, their energy drained. Some whispered to each other nervously, others kept silent. The manager lingered near the counter, staring at the floor, his jaw clenched. He looked like someone who had just watched The Confidence. Lived on slipped through his fingers. As the staff filed into the back, one of the auditors stepped outside for a moment of air, noticed the customer still standing there. The auditor gave him a nod. A small gesture of acknowledgement. Then the door closed again. Inside, the auditor spoke briefly with the staff, reminding them of the company's values and the expectations they were required to uphold. Their words were calm but firm. This store will undergo further review, one auditor said. There will be follow-up visits. Policies will be enforced. And changes will be made. The room was heavy with silence. Meanwhile, outside, the customer took a slow breath and finally sat down on a bench near the store entrance. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smiling either. He simply felt quiet. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know what the auditors planned. But for the first time since he walked into that store, someone had listened to him. Someone had taken his experience seriously, and something told him that the story unfolding inside the store wasn't finished. Not yet. The moment the manager walked away from the display, the air in the store shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but people felt it the way they feel a sudden change in temperature. The team member who had stepped in earlier stayed close by, pretending to straighten a stack of shirts. Though his eyes drifted toward the customer every few seconds, he wasn't sure what was about to unfold. But something told him the day wasn't done testing everyone in the room. The customer stood quietly at the counter, holding the same calm expression he had kept since walking through the door. He wasn't angry, and he wasn't looking for attention, but he wasn't about to leave either. He waited, patiently, like someone who had long ago learned that storms often collapse under their own weight. The cashier at the front shifted nervously, glancing at the customer and then toward the back office where the manager had rushed off. He had never seen her behave like that. She usually enjoyed greeting wealthy clients and showing off new collections. But today, she had been so quick to judge and so fast to dismiss. No one in the store knew what the customer knew. No one knew what was coming, and no one expected the doors to open at that exact moment. Two people stepped inside. One older man in a neat gray suit and a woman carrying a slim folder under her arm. They moved with purpose, but not with the kind of rushed energy that comes from being late. Instead, They walked like people who had arrived exactly when they meant to. The cashier swallowed hard. Can I help you both?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "We're here to meet someone." She smiled politely but didn't offer details. The older man scanned the room. His eyes were sharp but kind, and he took a moment to observe everything: the shelves, the staff, the layout, the displays. Then his gaze landed on the customer standing at the counter. He smiled. "There you are," he said warmly, stepping forward. The cashier blinked. The team members sorting shirts froze. Even the shoppers near the handbag section looked up. The customer straightened, but didn't look surprised. "I didn't expect you so soon," he said. "We finished early," the older man replied, "and we thought it best to come in person, especially after what you told us on the phone." The customer nodded slowly. "Thank you for that." The woman set the folder on the counter. "Everything is signed and ready," she said. "We'll review it once the meeting room is available." The cashier's mouth fell slightly open. Meeting room. Signed documents? Why were these people talking to the man their manager had just humiliated? Then he signed the form. The older man took the paper back carefully. "Your recommendation will stand," he said. "This location will be approved, but under new standards. And your suggestions will be implemented within the month." The customer sat back, letting the weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't payback. It was change. And change lasted longer than anger ever could. A knock sounded at the door. The team member peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but the manager asked if she could speak with you." He pointed toward the front. "She hasn't moved from that spot since you left." The customer exchanged a glance with the older man, then nodded. "It's all right," he said. "I'll talk to her." When the customer stepped out of the meeting room, the whole store seemed to pause. The air felt heavy again, filled with expectation and uncertainty. The manager stood near the counter, her shoulders tense, her eyes down. The moment she looked up and saw him walking toward her, she straightened but didn't smile. "Sir," she began, her voice shaky. "I want to say, I am truly sorry for how I treated you." Didn't interrupt. She took a breath. "I judged you without reason. I was unkind. I was unfair. And I let my own assumptions guide me. I'm ashamed of that." Customer stepped closer, his expression calm but sincere. "Do you understand why it hurt?" he asked. She nodded immediately. "Yes, because you deserved respect. Because everyone does." He held her gaze gently. "And because you didn't just assume something about me, you assumed something about everyone who looks like me." Her breath caught. She nodded again, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I won't defend it," she said. "I won't pretend it didn't happen. All I can say is that I'm sorry, and I will do everything I can to be better. Truly better." The customer paused for a long moment. Then he said softly, "I believe people can learn where they failed. I believe they can grow. As long as they want to." The manager swallowed hard. "I do," she whispered. "I really do." He nodded once. "Then make sure no one else who walks through those doors experiences what I did today." Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. "I promise," she said. The store felt still. Staff members listened without pretending not to. Even shoppers sensed something meaningful was happening. The customer turned to the young team member who had helped him earlier. "Thank you," he said warmly, "for treating me the way people should be treated." The young worker blushed and stammered. "I just did what felt right." That, the customer said, "is worth more than you think." The older man and the woman approached from behind. Ready to leave as they walked toward the exit, the store seemed different. It wasn't louder or brighter. But something in the air had shifted again, this time for the better. The manager stood near the counter, watching them go. And for the first time all day, her expression wasn't tense or defensive. It was thoughtful, honest, ready for change. The customers in the store returned to shopping, but the tone had changed. People were kinder, softer, more aware. Outside, the sun was lowering. Casting warm light across the street, the customer stepped into it, breathed in, and let the moment settle. He didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge. He just needed the truth to land where it belonged, and it had. By the time the store closed that evening, one thing was certain. Karma hadn't waited for the end of the day. It had walked through the doors, spoken the truth, and left the lesson behind.